Hello, Colleen.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. I was just with your dad. We couldn't, we had to do a separate phone connection. We couldn't get him into the Google link. And so I had him on my phone, and then, so I got to figure that out this next week. But otherwise, doing well.
Good morning, Cindy.
Hello, Cindy.
Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Morning.
I hope you can add a little bit to the conversation around broadband and the technology piece. Did you join in any of those meetings that CBG put together, the consultant?
I didn't this recent time. I missed them. I saw them on my calendar, and they were all in the evening, and then I forgot.
Yeah.
You know, but
I think they were just mostly gathering information and what's our vision, strategy, you know, those kind of things, not really very meaty information. Anyway, that's kind of what.
Yeah, it'll be interesting anyways, because Starlink is a kind of a disruptor, game changer, hopefully.
Right, and Russ was the one that put that together. Russ put that together for the Hottowe tribe.
Right. Oh, cool. Good.
Yeah. I like Gary Nelson's picture. Oh, that's very funny. Hi. I talked to, I spoke to Russ last night about, you know, kind of what we might be talking about here. And so. And I'm glad that Doc from Olypen will be able to join us as well. And who else? The from CBG, I think Dick Neilson. Yep, here he is coming on. I didn't know if we'd have a very good turnout just because I thought everybody might be waking up and wanting to watch the news to see what the election results were rolling in. Like, I don't have time for this coffee thing.
Doesn't look like anything's going to change for a couple days at this point.
Yeah. Oh, good. Here's Russ.
Yeah, I was up till like 12, and then I jumped out of bed real quick this morning to see, okay, where were we at this morning? And I was bugging a friend of mine in Nevada. It's like, can you go to the election office and tell them how to do math so we can get this done?
Hi, good morning, Russ.
Good morning.
So, Russ, I will introduce you quickly to, let's see, Doc. I saw Doc come in. Doc Robinson is with Olypen. And we have Brian Albright, who is with Albright Networks. You can wave your hand, Brian. We have at least 2 school board members here on. Right? Wave your hands. See if I got, and thank you. And we have Randy Johnson, a county commissioner, who is on with us. And Crystal is just joining us right now. She's with the Makah Tribe. And I think Crystal's gotten several grants in this latest round from the Public Works Board. I think $425,000, Crystal. She's still connecting to audio, so. So she handles she's been handling all of the broadband issues for the Makah Tribe and is the subject matter expert on that for them. She's also a Clallam EDC board member. And then we have Bruce Beckett, who is just a really smart guy, a great feller. And you can wave your hand. And also is the Port of Port Angeles registered lobbyist at the state level. And so maybe he could start. Good morning, Crystal.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. And Doc, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. So let's see, it is 8 o'clock. I think I'll wait 1 or 2 more minutes because we still have lots of people coming in. But in the meantime, Bruce, can I put you on the spot? You gave a really good provided an email last night, kind of a recap of the legislature. Do you mind providing that for everyone while we're get folks rolling in?
Oh heavens, I haven't got it in front of me, so let's see if I can resurrect it out of my brain. I think the election results last night didn't result in the sweeping change that many were predicting. But there were some significant things if you're, interested in the natural resource arena, particularly along the coast. South of you in the 19th legislative district, Representative Brian Blake appears to be losing. He's been in office for a long time and has been the longtime chair of the Natural Resources Committee, and he appears to be losing to a Republican challenger. So kind of the interesting question is who will take his position. Also in that district, longtime Democratic Senator Dean Tacko is losing. So it's a little bit of a moderate voice in the legislature that appears to be on the way out, and that combined with a very interesting race in the Issaquah area where 2 Democrats went head-to-head. A longtime incumbent moderate business owner, Mark Mullet, was challenged by a nurse and Mark Mullet appears to be losing that race. So a little bit of a swing, not much in the way of numbers, 1 seat difference maybe in the Senate, but maybe sort of a swing in terms of direction within the leadership of the caucus. And in the House of Representatives, it appears that there's a 1 vote difference emerging, 1 to 2 votes. So not these big sweeping changes that people were expecting. And I guess in your district, your 3 members of the legislature were all reelected, I think fairly handily. So, the results in the Senate have given sort of, credence to the governor's call for some tax issues and the carbon issues. So that's what I'll kind of dredge out of my brain there, Colleen. Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I really appreciate it, Bruce. And thank you for letting me put you on the spot like that. So welcome, everyone. And it is 8:03. So we'll go ahead and kick this off. I'm really happy to have a good group on today, especially our state's Broadband Office Director is on with us, Russ Elliott. We've asked him to join us to kind of talk about what's possible for broadband, what is the discussion at the state level, how would more access to broadband be funded, and but also, I mean, he's got a really unique background, very business centric. So I'd like him to kind of start with that, share what his background is, and then if you'll give just where we are. I think, I know we've got a countywide study going on, but if you can kind of talk to us about things at the state level and maybe compare what other states are doing relative to Washington, that would be great. And then we'll open it up for questions. And I wanted to make sure Doc and Russ and Brian and Russ and others and Chris, I know Crystal knows Russ, but that we all are aware of what are the potential pathways going forward. So I'll shut it up here and pass it off to Russ. Thanks.
Well, good morning, Colleen, and thank you. I brought my morning iced tea. I hope that's okay, and a morning coffee. Is that's going to be legal? Good. As long as that's good, I'm in good shape. And the true expert on the call is Crystal. she's the one that's really getting great things done out there on the Makah and out in Nia Bay. And so kudos to her, and we'll look forward to hearing more about all the progress they're making out there for the Makah. But here at the state, so you wanted a little bit about my background, just so you know why I'm relevant in the seat I sit. For about 15 years, I started up an ISP in Southwest Colorado and northern New Mexico, which is the most rural parts of Colorado and New Mexico, serving a number of Indian tribes in that area, and and serving a lot of very, very rural communities, hard to reach areas, lots of trees, lots of 13,000 foot, 14,000 foot mountains that we had to build networks into. And so I've got a deep experience on how this gets done, especially in these rural areas and some of the challenges. I also had to compete with public funds. You know, in the state of Colorado, they decided to stand up at the beanpole time and the ERA time. They came in with a $200 million public network grant that came in and started to threaten to build on top of everything I had done in Western Colorado. And at the time, I'd had about 15,000 customers. I had most of the anchor institutions in Western Colorado and northern New Mexico, all of the school districts, and the threat was that they're going to come in and take all those from me, and they were going to build a more efficient network to the schools. And it was a very challenging time for me, but it was a time where I really stood up and said, okay, let's try to figure this out, because your way is not the right way, and perhaps my way is not the right way 100%. Perhaps there's something in between here that makes sense. And I was able to go to the governor of the state and sit on the utilities board up there and negotiate a public-private partnership that really made a lot of sense and allowed some of those public funds to come to our private infrastructure build and delivered infrastructure out to some of the most rural, crazy to reach places that we would have never been able to do because we wouldn't have had those funds. And the state would have never reached those areas because they couldn't have done it on the fiber network they were trying to build. So we were able to do it in a hybrid fashion, leveraging fiber, copper, wireless infrastructure, those types of things. So I've got a history of trying to build out last mile and really get some of those challenges taken care of. And that's what drew me up to, not drew me, but that's what attracted Wyoming to my efforts. And they called me and said, hey, come on up. We know that you know how to build networks in very rural areas. How about come up to the most rural state in the country and see what you can do? And went to Wyoming for a year and a half and actually had some very good headway there. And I'm excited to announce that the governor of Wyoming really took a big step this last month and allocated $86 million out of his CARES Act funds to broadband infrastructure and funded almost all of the projects that I had helped design while I was there that year and a half. We had outlined the same process as I'm standing up here in Washington. So in Wyoming, that was the dog that caught the bus. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the preparation when it meets opportunity, great things can happen. And it happened in Wyoming. Kudos to that governor and that state and what they did. I'm extremely proud of the fact that they took the risk. They bowed up against the December 30 deadline, and they said, we're going to do something. We're going to build infrastructure because it's the most important thing we could do in the state. Unfortunately, we didn't make that step here in Washington. We got $2.9 billion in CARES Act money, and not a dollar went to broadband infrastructure. I hope that changes. I hope that if we see a second stimulus package after we've determined the election and calmer heads prevail, that we see some kind of a stimulus that will allow for broadband infrastructure to be invested in. And if that happens, it will go to those communities and those areas that are prepared to talk more intelligently about the need. And that's what I'm here to talk about with you guys today. What I believe that the most important thing my office can do right now, and it is our number one policy, is that I'm going to chase federal funds for this state. It doesn't mean that I'm going to go chase federal funds and get them to me. That's not going to happen. Hey, if we're the dog that caught the bus and somebody says, okay, let's throw a state block grant from these federal funds we allocate, that's great. We'll get that. We'll distribute that. We'll do good work with that. But for the most part, what I see is a Community Connect grant that's open right now for about $70 million. That's open until December 23rd. I see a Reconnect grant that's going to open up after the first year. That'll be about $1 billion. RDOF is rolling right now with $16 billion out for auction that's being reverse auctioned right now by companies in the state. And we'll see hopefully a stimulus package that'll have billions to tens of billions that potentially. So there's never been a better time to be at the table for broadband infrastructure. And if we're truly trying to build broadband infrastructure for future-proof scalable networks, not just enough to get us by today, because we're selfish and we need to take care of our 25.3, which is a silly number. 10.1 is a silly number. 25.3, that's a silly number. These are numbers that are just silly. They're numbers that are that are potentially okay for today. If you get a full 25, it's okay, especially given you've got people educating, healthcare, and working and commercing from home, right? 25.3, you know, that's a smoke screen for people that aren't ready to invest in what the future is going to call for broadband. We have an insatiable demand for bandwidth in this country. We have to continue to commit to bigger future-proof networks. In order to do that, we're going to need big money. I get it. It costs a lot of money to build. You know, I was a small ISP. I knew what it was to build out infrastructure, but when I could come to the table and there's some of those public funds that were able to assist me, I took my expertise and my customer relationships and my community relationships, and I was able to leverage that money and make great things happen for the state and for the people of Southwest Colorado. I want to see that same thing happen here in Washington State. I want to support private investment. I don't want to build over it, but what I do is I want to encourage privates to get outside their comfort zone a little bit and start to really build. You know, we've got a lot of these incumbents that continue to receive high-cost funds and big subsidies from the federal government, and we're not seeing the infrastructure get built out the way it was supposed to build out. We currently have reverse auctions and subsidies coming to areas all over your area, all over Jefferson County, all over Clallam County. But are you seeing substantial investment in that incumbent infrastructure growing out and building great sustainable networks? It's not happening right now, especially in those rural areas. It's because there's no return on investment, and that's a hard place to build. I get it. But what I want to do is, first and foremost, you guys are way ahead of the game. You've organized a community. You've gotten excited about it. I was teasing Colleen about this the other day, that my last meeting before I had to hibernate into my basement for the last month was up there in Port Angeles with Colleen at one of your meetings there, one of the economic meetings. And it was really good to see your group getting together and talking. And at the time, I had mentioned that I wanted to stand up a map to get some data because this state is data starved. I had a challenge from a fellow in Forks that said, hey, you know, we've had data. Why don't you go find that data? I was unsuccessful at finding that data, but I'm excited to announce that we stood up a data program rather quickly, very unexpensively, and we have over 42,000 dots on our map right now. We're starting to tell a very clear story about areas of need and concern. Even there in Clallam County, I've got some folks south of Sequim that I've been working with. We've done a very good job right now of identifying that area. We know it now. So I'll tell you what, if funds came down the pipe and they said, hey, Russ, there's a bunch of broadband money here right now, that project to me is ready to roll, right? That project to me is ready for me to vet out a provider in that area that wants to go and take the initiative to build out to that south area of Sequim up in the hills there. You know, because it's identified, and we've quantified the speeds. We know what the technology is. We've done all that in these last couple of months. So that's what I'm asking you guys to do, and I'm hoping that as you guys go through your feasibility that you guys are in the process of doing right now, I'm hopeful that you guys will populate that data a little bit better, a little bit more robust, so we can talk a lot more specifically around areas of need and see that we can get your infrastructure built. You know, Crystal's doing a great job up on the point there. I'd like to get her a lot more robust technology up there so she can take it and really deploy it well up there. You know, you saw, I don't know if you saw just recently, we helped the Hottowe Tribe with a very significant deliverable up there where they, you know, were unconnected and really not being focused on by much of anybody. And we were successful at getting the Hottowe Tribe partnered up with SpaceX, and I'm excited to announce that I think almost every Hottowe Tribe member on the Hottowe Reservation now have better connectivity than probably 85% of the people in the state. So it can be done, but again, we have to quantify what the need is, and we have to be more intelligent in our ask, right? And I encourage you guys to continue down this path of discovery, but also get down the path rather quickly, because these funds are going to open. Like I said, Community Connect closes December 23rd. If there was a project that needs to be identified and ready to go, and a provider needs to be at the table saying, I'm ready to support this effort here, we could take that to the finish line. My office is standing up technical support and feasibility packages. Hopefully through this decision package period here, through this next legislative session, they'll approve that. And what that means is, what I've seen is the most difficult jump for a community such as yours, a small community, I saw it all over in Wyoming, was how do we get started? Where do we go from here? You know, how do we take this to the finish line? How do we go get those funds? We don't have time. You know, Colleen's doing 93 things and trying to take care of her family. I know broadband's important, but how do I get started? What do I do? How do I design a network? How do I figure out whether it's going to be sustainable on an income statement? How do I fill out this damn grant? It's so long and lengthy. And how do I get that, you know, So what my office is going to do, it's going to provide technical feasibility that will help you identify the build, gives you a pretty confident cost model for what it would be that you're trying to build out. Also a sustainable income statement that'll go with it that'll talk about, you know, leveraging either bonding or grants or private funds, and then build an income statement that allow you to see what your sustainability of that network would be. So you can attract a partner. And if it's one of the partners that are sitting here today, that's great. If it's Buck and your group, Doc and your group, it's fantastic. I mean, so that's what I would encourage, you know, that you're working with a local person that's really ready to start to make that investment. And then we'll help also bring a grant writer to the table who has a history of success at the USDA level. As a matter of fact, a week and a half ago announced our first proof of concept on my model, where Whidbey Telephone leveraged my technical feasibility group. We wrote the model for them, and our grant writer wrote the grant for them, and they were awarded Reconnect funds out of this last round. So it works. On the east side of the state, I've got a philanthropy over there that believes in it enough that they've set up 18 of these studies ready for Eastern Washington. I just got to go find them. So communities like yours would get together and we'd say, okay, we've identified an area. It's this area here, and we get that quantified in a feasibility study, and then get the grant writer to the table and help us write the grant and get the funds in. So that's what it is. You know, it's going to be the reason we're going after federal money, guys, is we know the state's not going to have a ton of money. We're going through a pretty economic challenging time right now with the pandemic. And what we're talking about right now is probably billions of dollars of need, billions, you know, not a few million. We've got a couple of good entities here in the state that are passing out a few $1 million. Public Works Board, CURB, they're doing good work. But it's not the type of volume we're going to need to change to move the needle in this state. We're going to need tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and billions in order to really build out future-proof, scalable infrastructure. I am technologically agnostic on last mile, so I don't want to get beat up by the wireless people that say that's not, you know, because I do know that wireless has a place, and certainly I built wireless networks, and I understand that. Just you got to make certain when we put up a wireless network, it has good line of sight, it's got good throughput, the access points aren't oversubscribed, and we've got good backhaul in there. You know? So I'm all about that, and we make certain we put up the CPEs that allow for good bandwidth through. So anyway, that's the pitch from the basement here in Mason County, and I think it'd be great to either take questions or let the smart person Crystal talk a little bit more about how it gets done.
Okay, thanks so much, Russ. Crystal, before you speak, and I'd like to have Dick Neilson speak as well, who's been hired to do the study for our county. So I'm letting you know, Dick, I'll ask you to speak in just a bit. But one question, you talked about areas that if you're ready to go, your area could possibly get some grant funding. How many households is that, or how many commercial sites is that you need to self-organize and have good understanding of what the need is? Is it 100 households? Is it 10? You know, can you characterize that a little bit more?
It's whatever it is, Colleen. So, you know, if you identify an area that's 10 households that doesn't have connectivity, but the 10 households on the other side of the street do, that's a project that needs to be brought to our attention so that I can talk to whoever's providing service on the other side of the street. Right? That's happening all over in Washington right now. I'm involved in probably 200 of these discussions right now around the state. You know, with providers that are providing across the street, but didn't cross the street because that's where they felt their return on investment was ended. So I've got to encourage that provider to cross the street. If I've got 10 people on the other side of the street and they all say they'll adopt, there's a good potential that that's going to be enough momentum for that provider to say, okay, you know what, we'll build over there, low cost or no cost, right? If you know, so any project is a good project. Now, Community Connect and these USDA projects, they do require some scoring metrics behind them. Community Connect will want to have some community anchor institutions that it's going to pass by, whether it's a rural healthcare clinic or a library or something of that nature. They will want to have a community center that you can leave open so you can have a computer there so people can access that, you know, on a daily basis. There'll be some requirements like that, and you'll score higher the more of those types of things. In Reconnect, they want you to go by farms in rural areas, right? So if you can all of a sudden say, we've got, you know, 150 farms and we're an opportunity zone, done. Hey, we've got a couple of tribes, winner, that's one that we could fund. That reconnect is going to be a big one. And it's one that if we've got a big project, I'm hopeful that your feasibility study will result in a plan that really does something robust for Clallam County, right? And a plan that says potentially we use the Clallam PUD, potentially, because I know it's hard for that incumbent to step up right now because they're not in that mode, So if there's another way right now to really bring some type of infrastructure development out there, we go at reconnect with a pretty aggressive program and chase it down, and that would be more the full on deal. RDOF, like I said, RDOF is rolling, so a lot of your areas right now, incumbents are bidding on, especially like the Jefferson and Clallam regions that were up for bid on RDOF. So that'll fall out here in the next month or so with who won those areas and who those companies are going to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks so much, Russ. One other point is I've been hearing from a smattering of people, mostly along Place Road over west of Port Angeles, that they've been contacted by Starlink to see if they're interested in that, their beta program of $4.99 for the unit and then $99 a month. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we were fortunate enough to be the first state in the country to have a Starlink beta test that proved out very, very valuable for the folks out on the Hottowe reservation. And hats go off to the Hottowe because they took a tremendous risk and they really were courageous to go out there and make a deal with somebody that nobody knew anything about and whether or not it was going to be successful or not. But they decided they were going to go ahead and do that. So Melvin John and his group, they really took a big jump there, and it was a leap of faith. And they've been paid off, I think, in return with regard to, they've got infrastructure now that they're receiving over 120 megs to the prem, each of the homes there, with an upload speed of around 40 to 50. And their millisecond latency is about 20. So if those of you that know satellite technology, the reason we don't like it is because one, we can't get the throughput because it's so, it's really, it's a long ways away, and so we just don't get that type of download speeds. And then second, the latency issue, 600 milliseconds coming from the geo high Earth orbit satellites make for a very tough signal and lack of quality on the final product. So this is changing the game. It'll be disruptive. They are looking at the reason that you're seeing areas is the way the satellite works right now, and their limited number of satellites they have right now in pattern. They've got to focus in on certain areas. So they will, based on demand, they're going to open up certain areas, and they've got to be an area where that satellite will be able to focus. So it's not, they don't have ubiquitous coverage right now of the United States. Currently, with their 600 plus satellites they have up on the way to 9,000 or something like that, they can cover, basically the width of Washington across the United States. So they're really looking at these areas up here. They've got a lot of their early demos open up in Seattle, so it's limiting a little bit of that capacity they have here in our region. But kudos to those folks that can get on it. I think it's compelling technology. Now, if tomorrow, I'm a fiber to the barn guy out here because I was a recipient of community. Our local incumbent received Community Connect dollars and was able to fiber up this rural community that I live at. I've got a farm out here in North Mason County. Tomorrow, if Elon Musk came to me and said, "Would you please put one of my dishes up on your house in lieu of the fiber?" I would tell him no. Right? I'm very pleased with having a direct connect piece of fiber that I know it still doesn't. We still don't know the capacity that infrastructure has. It's dependent on the electrons you put on each end. So I'm still a fan of the fiber infrastructure. I think it's got the future-proof capacity that I think this state really is going to have to look at. So anyway.
Russ, didn't you say something about a 10-mile diameter spotlight for different areas that they're looking at early on?
Yeah, so that's kind of the way the satellite is right now. Because of their limited number of satellites in the sky, they really have to focus their efforts in certain areas, and their focus right now is basically 10-mile radiuses. So if like I told you last night when we were talking, I think if they've picked a home somewhere, you can probably assume they've picked a few homes in that region. There's a sweet spot for them in you know, in the 30 to 60 homes in an area for them to continue proof of concept. Remember, we're still at the beta end of this project for these guys. It potentially alpha still, you know, because they're still way short of the number of satellites they're going to have to be compelling across the country. But they're coming, and it will offer some opportunity for folks with challenging location.
All right, thank you very much. Crystal, do you want to kind of share what your experience has been and what you're working on?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. It's good to see you all. We're working pretty hard on our broadband project here at Makah. Thank you for your kind words, Russ. I do get nervous when people start referring to me as an expert. Like, that's a lot of pressure. You know, we have made a lot of progress with our project. We've been able to, we've secured a STA, first of all, from the FCC. That's a special temporary authority that was to operate on our 2.5 spectrum over 3 channels. We needed to get that so that we could deploy a pilot test network. And so this is the network that that Doc, who's on the call, the network that he designed and engineered. It's an LTE network on the 2.5 spectrum over 3 channels. Our projections right now indicate that it's going to reach 99% of the residents on the reservation, which is huge because we have a lot of people in outlying areas that are unable to get service from CenturyLink, even though they did that fiber upgrade a few years ago. So not only that, we're able to give consistent speeds of 25.3. And I agree with Russ on the speeds. It's an arbitrary number. It's what's adequate for today. But that's not going to be what we're going to need much more tomorrow, much more. So building these networks to be scalable, to be upgradable at every given point, turnkey type of networks. It's really important. That's key, actually, because then you're not going to inhibit yourself with your growth, and you're spending your dollars, which are going to be a lot. You're using those dollars wisely and investing more into that network in the future, and that the ability to grow. So we're able to provide 2.5 or 25.3, and that's also important because the current providers that we have combined, all of them, CenturyLink and all of the cell phone companies, T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T is coming soon. They can't provide that coverage and those speeds. So that's what makes us a little bit different. The other thing that kind of sets us apart from everyone else is how we've been able to quilt a funding blanket, create a funding quilt, actually, because what we've done is we've taken objectives within the project itself and utilize that as a grant. So for instance, we needed a few years back, we needed to know strategic locations on the reservation where we can build another tower for communications. We have communications holes. It's problematic for search and rescue. And so we applied that radio study into a grant, and we were able to get $25,000 for that study. We now, at the beginning of this year, we had an idea of where we can put strategic towers, which helped us. That gave us a bit of a head start once we went into quarantine and started to really work in earnest on the 2.5 network. So I've been able to cobble funding here and there, and that's been the most effective standard operation procedure, really, is to be able to go after all these different pots of funding, because there's, as a grants writer, I've been writing grants for over 12 years now, and I have yet to see a specific tribal broadband grant. I saw one, actually. I did see one this year. But so it makes it really challenging. It makes it a little bit even more fun, I think, because there's all these different regulations that I have to work around and I have to be able to swim through. So on that note, we've been funded through CURB twice now for our communications projects. The first one was a feasibility study. The second one was for engineering, and that's what we were able to engineer the 2.5 network with. We received funding from EDA for partnership tribe funding. We've received funding from just most recently PWB for construction. So, you know, while we still have a shortfall, we're able to piece things together, and we're really confident because the other tactic that we have, the other strategy that we utilize is that we ask for whatever it is that we need at that time of the writing. So even though I know I might be able to get some backhaul out of this grant, this one grant, I'm still going to include 3 years worth of funding in this next grant so that I'm solid. And if it comes to it, then maybe I have to turn money down, which is a really, really tough problem to have. But right now, what we're doing is we have the test network up. We have 13 people on. We're going to be putting on an additional 37 more people. So we'll have a test network of 40, I'm sorry, 27. And so then the testing is going well. There have been some hiccups here and there, and if Doc wants to talk about that, he can go into the technical aspects and details of that. But we do anticipate that we'll be doing fiber construction next week. It starts, and so we'll be doing some fiber backing to access point location where a tower is going to be located. And then we are going to continue deploying the test network. And then we're going to start in on construction. I'm guessing probably around December 1 is when we're going to really start to pick apart what we included in that scope of work. So things are moving along quite fast.
Great. Thanks so much, Crystal. Next, and if you have questions for any of these folks, you can put them in the chat box and we'll get to that. But next, I'll have Dick kind of talk about, they've been hired to, CBG Communications has been hired as a consultant by the Port of Port Angeles and the partners that received CURB grant planning funding. The NODC, our nonprofit here that handles, is the economic development district for the 2-county region, hired CBG Communications to do that work. And it's not complete yet, but Dick, if you can kind of talk about what CURB, which is part of Department of Commerce, the Community Economic Revitalization Board, they provided a $50,000 grant and then it required a match. And so different entities across our counties provided that match, and the port paid for NODC to manage the project. So you can kind of talk about what are the requirements of the grant, how does that help us get to the goal of more broadband access across the county, and what have you learned, and when do you think this will be complete? And then after that, we'll have Doc talk about, Doc Beaudette is the owner or the general manager of Olypen, which I believe is the largest ISP on the North Olympic Peninsula. But and we're connecting Dick and Doc to talk later this afternoon. It looks like at about 1 o'clock. So take it away, Dick.
Actually, tomorrow, I think.
Tomorrow, Thursday, you're right. Mm-hmm.
Well, I wasn't really prepared for, with the lineup of things to discuss. I'm more the engineering side of the project. So as far as CURB requirements and whatnot, I know there are very specific requirements on how things need to be done, like a lot of in-person meetings. And of course, this project started right about the beginning of COVID. So there have been a lot of slowdowns there and trying to figure out how, let's face it, back then, most of us didn't even know what Zoom was really, or hadn't used it much. And now we're all experts at it, but it doesn't seem that long ago. But at that time we had to change paths quite a bit, as far as normally I'm, as an engineer, I'm out there on the ground looking at infrastructure and talking to people face to face and looking at maps with providers and whatnot. And you can't do that now, so it's been a little more difficult, really all of the steps, but we're getting there. We're through much of the needs assessment portion of the project. We had our community broadband meetings last week and the week before. We had 3 of them, one in Forks, for Forks in the western part of the county, Port Angeles, of course, and the area right around there, and then Squim as well in the area, the eastern part of the county. So we had those. We gathered up a lot of good information. I always like to say a needs assessment takes a lot of anecdotal information and makes it real, makes it official, some proof, put some proof to it. Me personally, the step that I'm still working on is creating maps of where broadband is today, what levels of internet, a lot of it's not broadband, frankly, where internet is available. And of course, then at the end of that process, you know exactly where internet is not available. So then we go into figuring out how to expand from what's there today. How do you get to some of these rural areas, extremely rural areas, I should say, where the density is very low, and make a business case for that. Russ was talking earlier about return on investment and whatnot. And you can build a fiber network to everybody at X number of dollars, but if there aren't enough people out there to support it financially and pay it back, you haven't really accomplished what you needed to accomplish. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at now. And Russ, I think I'm going to reach out to you. I've got some questions that don't necessarily need to be asked on this meeting, but I'd like to go through the speed test. What do they call it? The result page anyway, and some of those things, and talk about some of the providers and see, like for instance, CenturyLink, does the state have any, have a hammer that you can hold over CenturyLink, who of course is watched over at the state level as opposed to the local level. So questions like that I've got for you. So I will reach out to you for that. Again, from an engineering standpoint, I think for a meeting like this, I think that's a recap. And I can take questions, like Colleen was saying. So.
Okay, thanks very much, Dick.
Yep.
So, Doc, I hate to put you on the spot, but can you kind of talk about what Olypen provides? Generally how many customers you have? Anyway, just share a bit about Olypen as an ISP, and then what you're seeing as successes and what the challenges are for you to be able to provide service, and what, if you were in charge of this whole process, how would you like to see things happen that would potentially get close to an ROI?
Well, that's a tough one. Well, Olypen's been here since, 1994. We started out as a dial-up ISP and grew rapidly in the early days of dial-up when there weren't really any other options. We were waiting a year for CenturyLink to build a fiber out to the peninsula because we ran out of dial-up lines and they couldn't provide any further dial-up lines. And as soon as that fiber got in, of course, CenturyLink started DSL. Rather interesting history there because Olypen was actually courted by CenturyLink to be one of the DSL providers. At the time, CenturyLink indicated that they had no desire whatsoever to ever be a service provider. They wanted to provide the last mile and then let internet service providers like Olypen provide the service, which we did. And after we built up a substantial 14,000 customers for them, they decided it was worthwhile to get into the game and start competing against our customers. It's been a tough game to be a small ISP out here. We provide a variety of services and through a number of partnerships, strategic partnerships. We are partnered with CenturyLink on DSL. We do both wholesale service through them and direct retail. We're partnered with Wave Broadband as a reseller of them. We have our own wireless infrastructure. We provide fiber internet through Clallam PUD. We have some partnership. We actually had a very good partnership with capacity provisioning in Port Angeles for fiber service until capacity provisioning sold out to Wave, who ultimately sold out to RBC, a big national, which really brought everything downhill. So our biggest challenge out here is been competing against the larger entities who are interested primarily in getting the gravy and not servicing the outlying areas. But between Olypen, Nicola, Crestcom, we are really covering the underserviced areas. And our biggest strategic partner in that, surprisingly, has been Clallam PUD. They provide, hands down, the most reliable network on the peninsula. Neither Wave Broadband nor CenturyLink can compete in the quality of service that that network provides, nor can they compete in the speeds that are available at the price that's available. Our biggest impediment with the Clallam PUD fiber is the build costs. The upfront cost is substantial because it's a, there's no subsidy on that. They build it for whatever it costs. And of course, it's all prevailing wage labor. So it's an expensive build. But once the build is in place, the infrastructure is in place, it is the reliable network at the best cost. And it's the best opportunity for us small guys to be able to compete against the big guys. Moving a little bit to Nia Bay and the project out there. That's been a tremendous opportunity. Crystal's very active, very good on this. She goes after grant money like a pit bull. And she's been real good about the FCC. She's brought herself up extremely knowledgeable about networks, though she claims otherwise. And together we've been able to build a dynamic network out there. It's a lot of moving parts. It's tower sites, it's fiber builds, it's FCC licensing using the LTE microwave band. It's a shame that when the FCC made that window for tribal entities available, they didn't also give an opportunity for small internet service providers like Olypen, Nicola, and others, because we would have jumped at the opportunity to grab that 2.5 gig band in some of these rural areas and build out to it. Unfortunately, we're locked out of that. The small section that they did give us, the CBRS band, is so narrow, it's almost worthless. So that's kind of a rundown of what I've got. Hope that helps, Colleen.
It sure does, Doc. Thanks very much. At this point, does anybody have any questions? That I've seen some things in the chat box. Do you want to ask, Neil, do you want to ask your question? I understand you're at Lake Dawn. Go right ahead.
So thanks. So Lake Dawn, we're one of those isolated communities 5 miles from Port Angeles, south of Port Angeles, in the foothills. Things like the Elon Musk service won't work because we don't have good sky view. The frustration I have, and I do appreciate that there is no magic wand, that each community has their own challenges to what backhaul may be available. But for us, and why I'm here, is there is literally a fiber cable with dark strands that run 100 feet from Lake Dawn Road that the Park Service put in 2 years ago, and we've been working for 2 years trying to get to a yes so that we can lease some of these dark strands. So the problem I'm having, and I think others may encounter, and I don't want to just make this about me and my community, is how do we get awareness of dark fiber and access to dark fiber so that companies like Olypen, and Doc has been to the community, he's like, hey, if you can get access to the fiber, we can get the last mile to you. You know, we can get to the homes. So it's great that Doc is here, and he has recognized and shared that if you can get access to the Strand, we can get you internet service. But I don't know how to get a federal government agency to yes.
Russ?
Yeah, so yeah, Neil and I have been going back and forth in chat over here, but this is the first I've heard of this, and I guarantee you I will get to the bottom of it for you. I mean, this is you know, it was great to hear Doc's story, because Doc's story is identical to what I went through, right? We were dial-up, we did the whole thing, we had a partner, we co-located inside of CenturyLink. So he's been doing he's the partner you guys want out there. He's the guy that's also going to be the nimble guy that's going to work with the PUDs and build the infrastructure and continue to extend networks, because he can. But he's going to need resources. So resources if I can go to National Park. If I go to this national park lady today and give her a call and say, hey, what's up? How do I get access to this? I'll get you an answer, Neil. They'll either say yes or they'll say no. So I guarantee you I'll move this needle for you. Because there's a commitment right now, and you know, it's all, you know, everybody's talking a good game right now, but my commitment is to try to bring that talk to a level of play, you know. And so if we've got a commitment at the state level to say, all state entities need to work better together to you know, ensure better broadband deployment and leverage all of our infrastructure, including, you know, National Park Service or DNR towers or right. They need to come and need to put their, you know, they need to act. So Neil, I will get to the bottom of this for you. I'll have it for you before the end of the week.
I'm grateful. I'm just, you know, delighted to sort of share, let's say, our experience, so that other people that might be representing other communities understand that, you know, there's not going to be a magic wand. There's not a secret solution. It just takes perseverance. And, you know, I think, Russ, if you are able to speak on behalf of the state government, that I think is what it's going to take, because, you know, I think government employees, it's easy to say no. Yes has work. You know, we're not asking for power. We're not asking for building access. You know, we want to demarc on the outside of a pull box or on the outside of one of the structures that are right next to Lake Dawn. So it's just, you know, mind numbing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Neil, what I'd do is I'd take this one step further. I'd be working with Doc right now to understand where he's going to pick that up, where he could cross connect if he's going to be the provider. You know, there's got to be, because you're not going to be able to, National Park Service is not selling broadband, right? So that fiber is going to have had a head end somewhere down closer to town, right?
Doc has already, he has literally come to Lake Dawn.
It ties into PUD. It's going to be a no-net link outbound. So
beautiful.
There's a link there. Once I have, and actually PUD would provide the lit service to it, then I just have to install a cabinet and start building infrastructure.
What have you guys done a cost analysis on? You say it's 40 homes up there. Have you done any cost analysis on doing fiber to 40 homes? Is it aerial? Is it buried?
Given the location that we're dealing with and the terrain, this would probably end up being a wireless network that we would provide, but it would be, you know, a high-end wireless network. We've got a lot of options available. In fact, it was a couple of years ago, Neil, that you and I met and talked. And since that time, the advances in some of this equipment have just gone through the roof. They're in a prime area for a 60 gig network, which means we get some incredible bandwidth.
Yeah, you could. Okay.
So,
all I want to say real quickly though is just let's not underestimate the fact that there are going to be federal funds here, and I don't want us to not build out fiber because, you know, because wireless makes a little bit more sense. I mean, if there's an opportunity here to pursue some of these, I'd love to here's the deal. So we'll build, that's fine, we'll build wireless, but please give me a cost of what it would take to fiber that up, just so I have it in my hand, so I understand it, just in case something happened and somebody said, you know, I got $7 trillion I got to give away, and you got any crazy projects? I'll say, yeah, I have one in Clallam County. Here it is. So so one of the things that I'm running through my decision package right now, and I'm hoping I'll get it done, is I'm going to have a feasibility study to understand what it costs every tribe in the state to have fiber to the home to all tribal members. Now you could say that's nuts, and it probably is nuts when you think about the Yakima nation. You think about the Colville tribe and the size of that, and what would it take? It's probably going to be trillion. We don't know what it's going to be until we know what it's going to be. Everybody can sit and make guesstimates all day long, but until I get a measurement and I understand what it is we're talking about, we can't talk intelligently about it. We can make guesses. So I think it's on our best interest to understand exactly what it will take, and then we can back down from there. Right? We can sit back and say, okay, to do a fiber to the home project for the Spokane Reservation. I've already done it. I did the feasibility study. Take $22 million. That's probably too much. But if I served up now, if I take that network and I pair it back to where 80% of the people are on the Spokane Reservation, and I build wireless out to the last 20% because that's the most cost-effective way to do it. We've
Bingo.
just built a super network for the Spokane Reservation for about $3.2 million. That is something I can go to the feds for tomorrow and say, help us get this done. These people deserve it. Get them on, and we'll get that money. But we can't do it until we can talk intelligently about what it's going to cost to build. So please give me a cost, and then we can go both ways,
Also, Russ, if I can just interject for a minute. Another thing I'd like to see in this whole legislative process that, we've asked for again and again, and we seldom see, is some leaning towards the small ISP service providers that are actually on the ground doing the work. I just give you a quick example here is the CenturyLink had a considerable grant to extend their fiber out to the Nia Bay Reservation. They did so, great dog and pony show with all the politicians. And when it was all said and done and they walked away, do we get anything to the home? No. Right. This was our backbone. You've still got lousy DSL and poor copper in the ground. And I was very close to that project and knew that Clallam PUD had offered to build that fiber for CenturyLink, who was building across their poles. It would have been half the cost, and Clallam PUD would have had dark strands in that fiber of their own. But CenturyLink went the other way, and there was no pressure to cooperate with that to provide the diversity of providers.
Hey, Doc, I'm afraid to use the term because your name is Doc, but I'm your Huckleberry, right? So this is we're gonna change this whole dynamic right now. Just you've got somebody right now at the state at the lead of the broadband office that one, they're kind of giving me some leeway and some leniency on how I act. Two, I can talk intelligently to providers and not let them run over me because I've been there, done that, built that. So when a big provider comes and tries to lean on me and pressure me, I can push back and say, yeah, no, once you decide you're going to build outside of Seattle, you come talk to me. But you can't be in downtown Seattle and tell me how I'm going to run Clallam County. That's just not going to be the way it'll be. So if I would have been here when that would have happened, I guarantee you it would have been a different outcome. So we will not allow that to happen again. We're going to be very, very serious about, I'm trying really hard right now to change some of the policies in the state around anchor institutions. I see there's a library on here. I am 100% adamant that we are not going to allow anchor institutions to be given to providers for 3 to 5 year contracts with lucrative recurring revenue, guaranteed money, without that provider also talking about how they're going to serve the surrounding area of the anchor institution. If you allow an anchor institution to go away, you have destroyed the economic model for small communities. So we can't allow that to continue to happen. That picking, the cherry picking of the big money. The big money opportunities. So you'll see, we're going to see a lot of change. Doc, I'd like to connect with you a little bit more outside of here because I think you and I will have a nice relationship going forward.
Sure, I'll get your contact information far off mine to you. Colleen can provide that to me.
Right. So one thing I've been curious about is I understand as you're talking about that institution that schools have K2 lines we've got this fiber that goes to a school, that might be in a rural area, and can we tap into that if there's excess capacity? Well, question number one, is there excess capacity to those schools? And then is it a restriction because of gifting of public funds? Is that the problem? But, does it make sense for the state to put grant money in to put a parallel line right next to it and then provide it to residential areas? Is that something that you, Russ, could tackle if that is a potential solution in areas?
Yeah, therein lies your challenge, right? So you've just hit on exactly what I was talking about. We're allowing, and it's K-20. So we're allowing the K-20 network to go out and take bids from providers to serve educational institutions in very rural areas, and then not requiring those providers to do more work once they deliver the service. So the answer to your question, if somebody's got fiber, we don't know the capacity of fiber. It's a finite capacity right now. So if there's a fiber line to Crescent Schools, which there is, we have unlimited capacity right now. Just it's only dependent on the electronics you put on each end of this piece of glass, right? So we've got robust connectivity going into Crescent Schools. The people around Crescent, they're poorly served and having some challenges right now based on some of the conversations I've had with Dave over there at Crescent Schools. So the answer is when we negotiate and we have the leverage. I'm going to take a bid for Crescent Schools. Who wants to bring service? You want to bring your fiber in? That's fine. Bring your fiber in, but you're also going to tell me how you're going to serve the kids around the school. Because how ironic is it right now that schools are hooked up, they're empty, they've got monster pipe to them, we're paying the bills on time every month, and kids are at home and they can't get educated right now. We have had backwards policies for far too long, and we have to start thinking more realistically about how we solve this problem. And that therein lies one of those answers. You don't let CenturyLink build down into a school and then move on without a commitment to building to the neighbors around there. It's, it's unintended consequences of good intention. It happened in Wyoming too, right? You had the K-20 network built up by the Wyoming IT CIO, right? He was very proud of the fact that he was doing this. And the reason he said to me when we first sat down, he says, I did it because I know if I extend those companies' networks, they'll do good things for those communities. He made an assumption that just is not correct, and it just doesn't happen that way. You have extended the network, but you haven't required them to take it the next mile, right? So we're working on a state policy that's called Anchor +1. You'll see more about it as we start to play with it. But what I'm saying is if you're going to get an anchor institution in the state, you're also going to help people around that anchor in some form or fashion. There's got to be some kind of stipulation in that.
So Russ, one other thing, we talked last night about the school districts and trying to gather information from all the school districts about the students, whether they had internet connectivity. And so can you talk to that? You talked to Senator Lisa Wellman, and she's making an ask to superintendents, I understand. Can you talk about that?
As far as so what I'm working on right now, and it goes back to what who was the fellow that talked earlier? Was it Dick Dennis? I can't remember.
Dick Neilson.
Dick was talking earlier. The goal right now is we've got to get better information so we can talk more intelligently about areas of need and what if the structure's there, those types of things, right? So what I'll be working with on schools is here relatively shortly. I'll try to pull out something called. We just we brainstormed it last week. We're going to call it speed test week, right? So where we develop little programs for schools in their lesson plans to allow kids while they're sitting at home to take a speed test and acknowledge what that is, why that's important. Talk a little bit about broadband. Talk about the future of broadband, why it's important, and really start to try to educate the younger generation on the importance of broadband. So watch for that to happen here soon, and we'll be pushing that out because we've got right now an unprecedented opportunity to really measure what our networks look like right now. We've got 1.2 million students working from home right now. If I got a 10% return on that investment of those students coming back and giving me something, we would have a very robust map, and we could start to really get a baseline of where we're at, and then have that as our future measure of where we're having some success in changing the dynamic of broadband. So that's what we'll be doing with schools. And because schools there's such an insatiable desire for local command and control in this state, we haven't leveraged the economies of state scale and scope. So we're still today trying to figure out where students are that don't have connectivity. That blows my mind. We were asking that question in March, and here we are now. What are we, almost November of 2020, and we're still asking where those kids live, where are they? We just don't have a centralized database. We're working on trying to bring that together too. We're trying to bring data. It's our first conversation, I think. You see my slide ends with what gets measured gets done. I want to talk more intelligently. I don't want to talk in circles anymore. I want to talk very matter of fact about how we're going to fix this. So gathering data, centralizing some of that data, and really starting to talk about where that need is and identifying it, quantifying it is going to be critical.
So Brian Koo had a question about T-Mobile ISP. Brian, do you want to ask?
Sure. Ironically, my signal's bad, so if I cut out, apologies. T-Mobile, Russ, have you heard anything about that other than I believe it's still in beta testing?
Yeah, so I work with T-Mobile. They're part of the Sandbox Technologies here in the state, and what they've told me they're looking at areas. Actually, Clallam County is one of the areas they're trying to build up towers. It's a 2-year process. It sounds like right now. They are playing with the 600 megahertz spectrum, which they got from the Sprint acquisition, which allows them to do some pretty creative things in some of that lower spectrum, that area. And so you'll see some things come out there, but it's going to take some time. And again, they're building their networks on return on investment, not on where it's needed most. And 5G is such a focus for everybody right now that a lot of that focus is in our more urban areas, and it's hard to get them directed to the more rural areas. But we are having conversations, and they have on their radar to bolster their services in Clallam County from the last map I saw. I don't have anything more than that other than I just know they're making the investment.
So, and also I saw Gary Nelson put something in the chat box, which I didn't understand. So obviously he is an expert in this kind of space. Gary, do you want to pose what you put out there? You're on mute.
Unmute myself. Hi, I'm Gary Nelson. Well, one of the things we are right on the cusp of wave division multiplexing coming from the backbone network into the access network. The latest ITU standard defines multiple 10 gigahertz wave division channels that could be leased one at a time or provided to an ISP one at a time. And in January, the ITU started a whole new study group to define a WDM passive optical network. So who knows what that's going to entail? It could be 100 channels. So if we're talking about a sustainable, upgradable, future-proof network, we really have to include WDM. And it's a very exciting opportunity, as I see it. We could that national park fiber could have at least 4 independent 10 gigahertz channels, with 10 symmetric 10 gigahertz services 4 times.
There is no theoretical limit to the number of channels. Actually, 4 today would be somewhat minimal. WDM's been around for quite some time. It became real popular in the cable TV world years back. It's evolving, absolutely evolving. It's growing and everything else. But you're right; it's here to stay in some form.
I mean, I don't want to get off in the technical weeds, but yeah. WDM, as it's used, is used in submarine cables and long distance, and it's designed to fit into the optical amplifiers. This is an access network WDM, so it's a different animal. Okay. But it's very exciting stuff.
So for those of you that would like to give input to Dick Neilson, that is collating the opportunities and information, would you put your email address in the chat box, and then Dick can contact you? Sure. To as they've been hired to do this assessment and gap analysis and that kind of thing. And then Dick, if you can grab those, or I'll make sure you get the chat, and then you have a few more folks to connect to.
Absolutely.
So, wonderful, thank you. So I see that we're past 9 o'clock. And let me look at this last chat. Is there anything else anybody wanted to talk about or ask of these broadband internet experts before we sign off and call it a morning? Okay, not hearing anything. I am going to say thank you to Russ and to Doc and to Dick and to Crystal and to Gary and everybody else who has such a depth of knowledge in this space. I really appreciate you joining us, and hopefully this kind of communication can help us move forward so that as we're trying to figure out some solutions so that, there's a little bit more equity in around our county so that people have broadband access, and especially for kids and, having to go sit on a school bus or go to, to have internet access through a hotspot or something, that's just not really reasonable. So thank you so much for joining us. And I won't close it out right away so we can grab all these email addresses and contact information out of the chat box. So thank you for joining us, and enjoy your day. Stay safe.
Colleen.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Colleen.
Thanks, Crystal.